Lord of the Rings Online is the only Middle-earth based game which really lets you explore Tolkien's world whilst keeping entirely within the spirit of the books. In this series I'll be exploring the works of Tolkien's Middle-earth, its regions, characters and histories as I quest through the Lord of the Rings Online game. In this first episode, the High Elf hunter Thete will fight the forces of Mordor at the end of the Second Age. The Siege of Barad-dûr, the fortress of Sauron, was a battle for the fate of the peoples of Middle-earth at the end of the Second Age. The Second Age may be characterised as the period of just under 3.5 millennia where darkness arose and made war with the works of the Valar. Morgoth had been banished, but his servant Sauron had risen up in his place. Sauron was a Maiar, a spirit of the same kind as the wizards who would later journey to Middle-earth. Unlike the wizards, however, who deliberately took the weakened physical forms of old men in order that it be their wisdom which swayed men and elves, and not to use intimidation, Sauron gave himself no such disadvantages. He used guile where needed, and raw strength where that seemed most expedient too, especially once he had completed his rings of power. Notable events in the Second Age including the forging of the One Ring, the creation of the Nazgul, the fall of Númenor, and the founding of Gondor. At the end of the Second Age, a last alliance of men led by Elendil and elves led by Gil Galad invaded the land of Mordor to end Sauron's dominion once and for all. Elendil was the first High King of Gondor and father to Isildur, who would cut the ring from Sauron's hand, thus ending the Second Age. He was also named Elfriend. After the fall of Númenor, Elendil founded the realms of Gondor and Arnor. He took with him the Palantiri and a seed of Nimloth, the White Tree of Númenor, from which the White Tree of Gondor was grown. But more of that much later in the series. The Palantiri were used to maintain communication between the various city-states that Elendil and his sons Isildur and Anarion founded. When Sauron attacked Gondor from his realm of Mordor, Elendil and Isildur went to seek aid from the elves. They returned with a combined army of men and elves with which to challenge Sauron. The elf army was led by Gil Galad, the last elf who would claim to be High King over all the elves of Middle-earth. When Sauron, in disguise, attempted to trick the elves into helping him craft the Rings of Power, Gil Galad became suspicious and turned him away. His instincts eventually proved correct when Sauron convinced the elves of Eregion to aid him. Eventually Gil Galad was given 2 of the elven Rings of Power by Celebrimbor, which he then passed to Elrond and Círdan before his death. Gil Galad was an elven king, of him the harpers sadly sing, the last whose realm was fair and free, between the mountains and the sea. His sword was long, his lance was keen, his shining helm afar was seen. The countless stars of heaven's field were mirrored in his silver shield. But long ago he rode away, and where he dwelleth none can say, for into darkness fell his star, in Mordor, where the shadows are. During the siege of Barad-dûr, Elendil and Gil Galad both fell, and with them their legacy began to be diminished. But their war was victorious, and Sauron was defeated, though his Ring of Power was not destroyed, and so his spirit lingered within Middle-earth, waiting for its chance to rise once again. This it did some 3,000 years later. With Sauron's defeat, the Second Age ended, and the Third Age began.